A few days ago in a post, I asked you guys what you wanted me to read next. It sure wasn't Fourth Wing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know nobody likes you. It's okay. So you chose Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I really want to take my time reading Mistborn, so what I decided to do is I'm going to actually break this review down into parts. So I plan on reading a few chapters, getting far enough along in the story that I have kind of something to talk about and things to say, and then kind of break this down into bite-sized pieces for you guys. When I did my Pet Sematary review, I did it all in one big video, and honestly, it didn't get the traction that I would have liked it to get. It's hard for people to just sit through an hour-long video, which I understand. Just a quick heads up, these deep dive videos will have spoilers in them. In this video, I'm going to be discussing chapters 1 through 4. So if you've read up to or past chapters 1 through 4, you should be safe. If you haven't read chapters 1 through 4 yet, there's going to be spoilers. So right off the bat in chapter 1, we're introduced to like one of our main characters. Her name is Vin, and she's a Ska. And so what a Ska is they're like the lower class citizens of the town or of the world, I suppose. They're treated kind of like as slaves, and they're looked down upon, and they're considered like thieves and scammers and such, which is true. They are thieves and scammers. So in this world, the Ska women are looked down upon so much that they're typically traded into sexual servitude for the higher class. The problem is if the higher class have sex with these Ska women, they have to kill them because they can't mate with them. They can't have babies with them. So Vin has been able to avoid getting traded into like this sexual servitude by joining a thieves guild, for lack of a better term. It's this group of Ska men who go around breaking into homes, stealing, selling the wares and making profit from stealing from other people, or in some cases running scams on people to get money out of them. And Vin kind of just joined this group, and she's kind of laying low. She doesn't really talk to anybody. Like when there's a room full of people, she'll sit in the corner by herself. She's just trying to lay low as much as possible. The leader of this group beats her up, like physically harms her and slaps her around and stuff. And so she tries to stay low key and not make any kind of ruckus for fear that she'll get beat. So the leader of Vin's group, his name is Kamen, and he comes up with the plot to run a scam on the ministry, which is kind of, to me, it sounds like it's like the government of the main town. So they're plotting to run this scam on the ministry. So they meet up with one of the powerful people of the ministry called an obligator. And this obligator is the one to make the decision whether they're going to accept this contract that they've agreed upon. Or I guess that they've presented to them. They haven't agreed upon it just yet. And so they go in and talk to this obligator, and the obligator is kind of giving them a little bit of pushback, and they don't want to agree to the contract. Vin is actually able to use her luck to control the mind of the obligator to get him to become a little bit more agreeable and kind of persuade him to agree to this contract. And so the obligator agrees to the contract, they get the money, and then they leave. So they get back to their hideout, and apparently what had actually happened is the obligators are able to detect when these powers get used on them. And so like the obligator knows that they've used this power on him to persuade him, and he's sent some people after them to capture or kill them or whatever. And so this is when we meet our next basically main character, and his name is Kelsier. And Kelsier is a Ska as well, but Kelsier actually has these powers, and he has like multiple powers, so he's considered Mistborn. If you have one power, you're considered a Misting, and if you have 2 or more powers, you're considered Mistborn. And Mistborn are like the most powerful that you can get. But the weird thing is that Skas are not supposed to become Mistborn. Only the higher class people are supposed to be Mistborn because they don't mate with the Skas, and this power runs in your bloodline. So what they've done is they've gotten rid of the power in the bloodline of the Scars, supposedly. But apparently there are some out there that still have this power. They're just very rare. Vin is a very untrusting person. She has a brother who betrayed her in her past, and her brother always used to tell her, she has this quote kind of repeating in her inner monologue in her head. And the quote from her brother is that anyone will betray you. Anyone. And he kept telling her this over and over and over, and then he ended up actually betraying her. And so if she thinks basically if her brother is going to betray her, then anybody can betray her. And throughout her whole life, she's seen the Ska betray each other over and over and over again because they're so poor that any opportunity for them to make $1, they're just going to backstab and betray their friends. So she's kind of used to that by now, and she doesn't trust anybody. So we're introduced to Kelsier because he was actually kind of watching Vin because they found out that she had these powers, and so they were watching her kind of run this scam with her crew. They realized that they were being followed back to their hideout, and so Kelsier actually killed the people that were following them. So Kelsier is like this really charismatic character, and he has kind of this like legendary status because he's the only person who has ever broken out of the Lord Ruler's like prison. And the prison is called the Pits of Hathsin. I can only imagine that it's maybe like some kind of big pit. I don't know. So Kelsier is also a leader of like one of these scammer crews or like thief crews. I kind of relate them to the Thieves Guild from Skyrim. They seem kind of the same, where they have like these underground bunkers or layers that they go to have their thief guild meetings. So once Kelsier finds out that Vin is a Mistborn, he runs her through these tests just to make sure that she actually is Mistborn and kind of just confirm his suspicions. And once he finds out that she is Mistborn, he recruits her to his like Thieves Guild, I guess. And Vin is still very like leery of Kelsier and his crew because she's just a very untrustworthy person and she's kind of been abused her whole life. So of course she's going to be kind of leery of pretty much anybody. As a character, I actually trust Kelsier. He comes off as a genuine person, and he seems to be actually looking out for Vin's best interests. Through the whole book so far, he seems to be the only one that's actually treated her as like a human being or a normal person and not made any attempt to like betray her or abuse her or anything of the sort. But I have a theory why that might be. I think it could be one of two things. I think Kelsier is either actually a genuine person, which I tend to actually lean towards that, or Kelsier is using Vin to just kind of scheme his master plan. Because Kelsier has actually been recruited by the Ska rebellion leader to overthrow the Lord Ruler and steal all of his riches. Kelsier also has his own kind of revenge plot against the Lord Ruler because the Lord Ruler had imprisoned him. And so he also plans during this mission to kill the Lord Ruler. And that's kind of his own thing separate from the Ska Rebellion's plans. So he could either be just taking advantage of Vin to use her Mistborn powers to accomplish this takeover of the Lord Ruler, or he could just be a genuine person who actually kind of cares about her. Still kind of yet to be determined. I'm actually leaning towards the latter. I think he actually cares about her, and I predict that they're actually going to build somewhat of like a bond or a relationship throughout the rest of the book. So at this point, Kelsier is actually training Vin to use her powers and how to control them and how to like consume the metals to pull more power, etc. And he's really kind of teaching her and training her and being a mentor to Vin to help her build her powers. Vin is actually building a little bit of self-confidence. Her whole life, she's been looked down upon. She's been physically beaten up. And she's always used this luck as a way to just protect herself and stop people from beating her up or like abusing her. Her inner monologue is starting to change from, hey, I'm using this power that I had no idea what it actually was to protect myself, to now be more like, hey, there might actually be something to my life now. Like I might actually have a life ahead of me. And so I'm really enjoying seeing that change in her behavior and her confidence starting to like build and build and build. This is where I stopped. I'm at the end of chapter 4 going into chapter 5, and I'm excited to see how Vin grows. Her powers are going to grow, her confidence is going to grow, and it looks like they're going to start getting into like starting to attack or set up the army to attack the Lord Ruler. And so I'm really interested to see how Vin's character grows during this process. So to touch a little bit on the characters, Kelsier is a character that you can tell that he is kind of admired yet feared within his crew because he's a Mistborn, so they're scared of him for that reason. But they also admire him because he's escaped the pit and he's charismatic, and he's just he seems like an overall good leader. The problem with that is that he knows it, and so he's kind of a little bit cocky and arrogant and a little bit irresponsible with the way that he acts. He shows up late to meetings, and he kind of doesn't care necessarily about how other people feel and those kinds of things. So at these beginning stages of the book, I would consider Kelsier to be like a chaotic good type of character, if you want to classify him that way. I think he's chaotic good right now, but I predict that he's going to be, I think as the book goes on, he's going to turn more into kind of a morally gray character and less of like chaotic good. He's going to make that transition into more of a morally gray character as he pushes through to try to accomplish his goals. I don't know that he's going to succeed in killing the Lord Ruler. I'm not going to make that prediction yet, but I think as he attempts to get to that goal, he's going to turn more and more and more maybe to the dark side, I guess. I kind of spoke on this already a little bit, but my favorite character so far is Vin. Vin was the first character we were introduced to, and I know the most about her and her backstory. And so it's pretty easy at this point to be attached to Vin. And Vin also has the most growth potential because she started off as just a ska with something that they were powers, but she didn't know that they were powers. And so now that she knows that they're powers, she's going to be able to control them better and grow them and become even more powerful. So right now, Vin has the most potential, and she's been my favorite character so far. As far as the side characters go, all the characters that are in like the crews and all that kind of stuff, I kind of don't care about them yet. Like they don't have enough backstory for me to really care about them. I think it's really cool how they set up the crews where they brought in different characters with specific skill sets and specific powers. I just don't care about those characters yet. I hope throughout the book they kind of build on those characters and kind of make us care about them a little bit more, because I do predict that some of them are going to die during this whole process of trying to take over the Lord Ruler and steal all of his riches. So I just hope they build on that enough for me to care when they actually do die. As far as the world building goes, I'm really intrigued by the world that they've described so far. The book opens up right away with the first line is, "Ash fell from the sky." And so right away they hit you with, they kind of set the tone for the world, where it's a really dark and gloomy world with ash falling from the sky like snow, basically. And it even explains that the ash piles up in the streets kind of like snow, and the ska slaves have to go out and they're shoveling the ash into the river so to get rid of it, so the ash flows down the river and leaves the city. The class system that Sanderson lays out is pretty basic. It seems like there's kind of only two classes: the lower class, which is the ska, and the upper class, which is the nobles. I'm curious to see how that kind of fleshes out, because right now it seems pretty basic. And then the last thing that I want to touch on is the magic system in this book. So far, I'm really enjoying the magic system. It's called allomancy, and you get powers based on what alloys that you consume. So consuming different types of metals gives you different types of powers. And it sounds pretty complex, but the way that it's delivered in the story makes it really palatable, and it's easy to understand. And I really am enjoying how he's delivering the magic system to us so far in the story. And it seems like more of like a hard magic system where there's like specific rule sets, and those rule sets really can't be broken, instead of like a soft system like Harry Potter where they can kind of just make shit up as they go along. That's kind of the way I see it anyways. There's set rules on how this specific magic works. I can see later in the story where this basic set of rules for this magic system can actually become really complex as they learn how to use it in creative ways to kind of do the things that they want to do with the magic. So I'm really excited to see how that kind of plays out as well. Hopefully breaking the review down into pieces is a little bit more palatable for you guys. I know sitting through an hour-long video is not something that everybody can necessarily do, so hopefully this works for you guys. All right, guys, that's going to do it for part 1 of my Mistborn review. Please go ahead and like this video if you liked the video, and comment and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Thank you guys for joining me today, and peace out.